Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second podcast on Internet awareness. I am Rafael Hepien,
And I am Andres Sevilla.
and today we would like to cover the matter of being aware on the Internet.
And when we talk about internet awareness, we don't want our listeners to be aware that the internet exists, but our duty is for the listeners to understand why and how they can roam the internet safely.
Because today we don't have any choice to be on the Internet or not. We are all connected, so we all must be aware.
And we use the internet to check our social media, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, for example. But even though not everyone has those things, everyone goes on the internet to check reviews for a restaurant or buy plane tickets,
Bus times.
check bus times, exactly. So we always use the internet even for the simplest things, like looking up for a definition for a word, for example. I mean, I could go to a library, but is it really worth going all the way to a library when I could just type the word on Google and look up for the definition?
To be honest, I don't even know how to find library. I would probably just go on an online library.
Exactly. But more seriously, we use the internet for even critical things, like checking our email or our bank account details.
And don't forget online shopping and all kinds of other financial transactions.
Yes. And now that everything's digitalized, personal information can be found on the internet, like your medical records and your identity details.
And now what Google knows about you is more important in the eyes of others than who you really are.
Exactly. The internet has become more important than ever before.
I have to agree with you. We can equate electricity to internet. Personally, when I'm out of internet, it's as if I had no electricity. Maybe it's just because I'm a geek. I don't know.
And if you're a geek, what am I, right? No, more seriously, the internet today has become much more than just computers. Watches are connected. You got your smartphones. You have tablets. You even have kitchen appliances now, like fridges. So, even though all these things have been constructed to be able to communicate on the internet, there hasn't been enough thought on the security aspect, has it?
Exactly. Now things are connected, but these things must be secure, and we must be more aware than these things are, right?
And the thing is, computers have existed for a long time. So, there's been a lot of research into securing these computers. When like you have antiviruses and firewalls. But the thing is, little things that we use every day that can connect to the internet, are they secure? Is your connected car secure? Is your CCTV camera that's supposed to stop thieves? Are they secure?
These are good questions. We really must learn to be responsible of our personal connected things. So to build up this adequate, genuine awareness, we're going to start by presenting some major cyber attacks.
After we present this cyber attacks, we will go on to the technical mechanisms that enabled hackers to get access.
But not going too much into that, but just the principal underlying mechanisms.
But the main goal of this podcast is for our listeners to understand how to be safe and what they can do to help themselves and their private details so that they can be out of reach of hackers.
And throughout, we will give you practical advice so that you can stay aware and safe while being on the internet.
So let's start with some devastating cyber attacks. Does any come to mind?
I'm thinking of the Yahoo 2013/14 data breach. In fact, there were two data breaches, and that resulted in 3 billion accounts being compromised. And that is more or less all the Yahoo accounts from that time.
It's a lot.
Did you have an account at that time?
I did. I've had it since 2014.
Wow. Well, I hope you've changed your password, or at least you don't use the same password for every account.
Thankfully, I do not.
That's a good thing, because now they have billions of password and usernames, and they can use that to link up with other accounts and compromise much more information.
But what do they really do with the 3 billion Yahoo accounts?
As we will see with the other breaches, is that they in fact sell all these account credentials on the darknet so that hackers can carry out attacks.
And of course, if people use the same password for different media, social media, they cannot just access your Yahoo, but also all the other social medias that are linked to your email and password, right?
That's what makes it important to have one password and one unique password for every account. What about you, Andres? Do you have some attacks that jump to mind?
I'm thinking of the Mirai DDoS. Have you heard of that one?
Just the name.
Okay, so what it is a botnet. And I'll explain what a botnet is. A botnet is when a group of hackers can gain control of a very, very large amount of connected devices. So for the Mirai, most of the devices that were exploited and so hacked were actually CCTV cameras that were connected to the internet.
And what did they do with all these compromised devices?
Well, what it did is what we call a DDoS. A DDoS stands for a distributed denial of service attack. And what it does, it sends thousands, millions of requests to a server. So the server is going to try and respond to all these requests. But because there's so many, it will eventually crash and not be able to respond to the legit requests.
And do we know how these CCTV cameras were compromised?
Actually, it was pretty easy because most people that have CCTV cameras don't change their default settings. So that means that the administrator password has not been changed, so the default one. And that is a big problem because if they're connected to the internet, someone can just log in using default administrator login and password.
And so what are the kinds of default password for administrative accounts?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say, so if you do have a connected device, you should change the default password. And if you haven't, this is probably one of the ones that it has. So the most common ones are root, admin, password, 1234, and 0000.
Wow. And also on some connected devices, you might not even know that they are connected because they're maybe, for example, just an alarm clock. So it's always important to check if they can connect, and if so, make sure you change that default root password.
Do you know any other data breaches?
So the second one, major data breach, happened in 2017, so quite recently, and it was the victim was the American company called Equifax, which is a credit reporting company. And so hackers stole from Equifax 145 million private information concerning the US citizens, such as security numbers, birth dates, and even driving license.
Wow. And how did the hackers do that?
So the flaw exploited was a software flaw where this certain software was expecting an input of a certain type. And if you entered the wrong type, it would then use what you've entered and build an error message. And what I mean by use what you've entered, I mean evaluate. And what I mean by evaluate, I mean execute. So through that flaw, you could remotely execute code, which is the underlying principle behind most of the attacks.
Is the vulnerability patched right now?
Well, the funny thing is that it was discovered before the attack, but Equifax failed to update and patch its infrastructure in time.
Wait, so let me get this straight. The vulnerability came out before the attack.
That's right.
And Equifax decided not to patch their system, not to update their software?
Well, it turns out when you have a big infrastructure, like for these big companies, it's quite a task to apply a patch to your whole infrastructure. Sometimes there's issues with backward compatibility, and so sometimes it's good to have systems that are out of date because they run on old software and it would require too much money and time to update.
And the second problem, I'm guessing, well, maybe not doesn't apply to Equifax, but other companies, is that when they have production servers, it's very hard to find a time for them to be restarted, because that's what you have to do when you apply a patch. You have to restart the server.
Right.
And when you restart servers are in production, that's money lost. And that brings us into a second attack, which is called Wannacry. Now, Wannacry is what we call a ransomware. And a ransomware is a malware that attacks your PC and actually encrypts all your files and folders. So what they do is they display a message saying, well, your files and folders have been compromised. So you can see that on screen right now, the type of message that you can get.
Unfortunately, that screen, we have seen it because many of our computers have been compromised with the Wannacry in my company.
Wow, that is very scary, isn't it?
It is. And for the same reason we mentioned before, is because some computers would require too much effort to update and they were still running XP and therefore were vulnerable to Wannacry.
Yeah. And the reason there's so many ransomwares is that on screen, as you can see, it tells you to pay for a key. Now, this is the key that is used to decrypt files and folders. Okay, the thing is, if your data has been encrypted and you pay the ransom, it's not sure that you will get the actual key to decrypt the files. In some cases, you do, but not every time. And we suggest that you do not pay the ransom. Your files have been lost, and we suggest that you do not pay them because it just gives them an incentive to keep doing these ransomwares.
Exactly, because we mustn't forget we're dealing with criminals.
And if you pay them, you're financing their activities.
So how is Wannacry different from any other malware?
Well, Wannacry used vulnerabilities that were published by a group of hackers called shadow brokers. And this group of hackers actually stole them from the NSA. So the NSA is the National Security Agency, so an agency in the United States. And what is known is that they actually used these tools to attack or maybe spy on organizations. We don't really know why they needed these tools. But what we do know is that Wannacry actually used these vulnerabilities to propagate the malware. So this vulnerability is used when machines communicate, the Microsoft machines communicate between each other. And so Wannacry used this vulnerability to not just communicate from machine to the next, but to actually transfer the malware from one to the next. So companies, like for example the NHS, that got this malware in one of their machines, like very, very quickly after one machine was compromised, all the machines that were connected to the network actually got compromised. So imagine you're working and your machine gets compromised and you see that all your colleagues' machines are also compromised. Get in the message we are seeing right now on the video.
So it falls into the category of a worm.
Yes, because it propagates from one machine to the next. Overall, Wannacry compromised over 150,000 computers in 150 countries. And some of the companies that are compromised are some of the biggest ones in the world today. Like, for example, the NHS in the UK, O2 in Germany, and PetroChina.
Our final attack on our list is Stuxnet, which was discovered in 2010 by Kaspersky Labs. And because of the quality of the code, it led the researchers to think that this one was a government-funded attack. The target was Iran, because at the time in 2010, Iran was building a nuclear weapon. And so this worm was built to slow down or even bring a halt to their nuclear plan.
So how did they do it?
Well, in the payload, which is the main code of this malware, they exploited 4 0 days.
4 0 days.
Maybe you could explain what a 0 day is.
So a 0-day vulnerability is a vulnerability in which there's no patch that has been made because simply has not been discovered. So it's a vulnerability that hasn't been available to the public yet. The only people that know about this vulnerability is the attacker himself. So the idea that this malware uses 4 vulnerabilities is that there's been a lot of research into it, hasn't there?
Exactly, and thanks to these 4 0 days, the worm was able to gain access in an undetected way to machines that were inside the Iranian lab.
And inside the lab, what did the virus exactly do?
Now that's very interesting because in fact, once the computers were infected, and these weren't any kind of computer, it was a computer that was controlling a mechanical system, and in this case, it was spinning centrifuges. So it was regulating the speed, the rotational speed of these centrifuges, in which we could find the radioactive substances. So ultimately, the worm changed the speed, the rotational speed of these centrifuges. But before doing so, it went asleep for a couple of months, I believe, in where it simply monitored the activity of the machines, so that when it was about to change the rotational speed on the control screens, it would display the activity it had recorded, so that the team that was supervising the whole process wouldn't have any alerts on their screens saying that something has changed.
So when the virus woke up, I'm sure it could have broken the centrifuges.
Exactly. Well, by changing the speed, increasing it to a very high speed and then lowering it to a very low speed, just like a spinning top, it fell and even exploded, wasting the precious material. Now one may wonder, how did the virus get in to this isolated environment, this environment being the lab, because it wasn't connected to the internet, it was on a private network. Well, how they did it is that they infected a company which had employees, technicians, engineers that went on in the lab to carry out work. And so it was through an infected USB key that the virus got into the lab.
So USBs are a very important vector of attack. Because of the complexity of the attack and the intentions, we can see that it is government sponsored.
Absolutely. Nobody has confessed being the author of such a cyber weapon, but we definitely know it's a government. And so this example, Stuxnet, shows that there is a cyber warfare between countries, governments.
As we can see, viruses can be so powerful, and they can even affect critical infrastructure.
Exactly. And computer worms can have real life consequences on real physical things, such as we see in Stuxnet. To finish off this podcast, we would like to illustrate with a demo on how stolen cookies can be used to steal an identity, connect to an account, and we're going to use, for example, a Twitter account.
So in this demo, we will show you a simple hack of cookies. No, not the cookies you eat, but the cookies that are saved on your web browser. So in my demo, I decided to create a Twitter account, so called Francis. This Twitter account has a very complicated password, but what I did was I downloaded an extension called Cookie Manager, in which we could see all the recent cookies. So I decided to export the cookies from this Cookie Manager, so the cookies that are linked to my Twitter account, and I used a new PC. Well, it's actually a virtual machine, but it's like if I'm using another PC. And what I did was I uploaded these cookies onto this new machine. So here I'm in my new virtual machine. As you can see, if I was on my Twitter, I didn't have Francis, it didn't exist in this machine. So I uploaded my cookies onto this. So then I went to my Firefox, and then I went to my Cookie Manager, and I uploaded the cookies that I had saved on my file. And what's interesting is, when I uploaded these cookies, I didn't have to do much. All I had to do was refresh the page, and there, I was in. And, well, I kind of hacked myself. So as we have seen, cookies can be very dangerous when they're not properly secured. And so, if I'm using, for example, public Wi-Fi, in which the traffic, so from my computer to Twitter, is not encrypted, my cookies can be on in clear, and someone could be sniffing them, and, well, they'll get hungry, because they'll be able to steal the cookies and log in as if it was me. Well, thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed our podcast and learned a lot from it.
And that from now on, you will be more aware, or encouraged to be as aware as you were today. and realizing that the internet is, although it's great, it's still a dangerous place.
This was Andrew Sevilla.
And Raphael Hetken, and we thank you for listening, and take care on the internet.
Goodbye.